In this video, we're going to talk about how to make proper splicing in a Hunter 2-wire system. In our Hunter Golf rotors, we have a two-way module that needs to be connected to a 2-wire path. But in many cases, we have to continue a line of 2-wire where one spool ends and one begins by making a new connection. Or in some cases, we'll be using the Hunter Pilot SG surge arrestor for our 2-wire grounding. So I'm going to start by showing you how to do a traditional two-way splice. So first, we're going to cut the 2-wire path where we want our splice to be. This may be a continuation like I mentioned before, or this might be just a place where you're going to add a rotor. So we'll cut the line. Make sure we have a nice clean cut. Now we can see that we have the 2 wires inside the sleeve. We're going to cut back about 10 inches of sleeving so that we can make a proper splice using our DBRY-6 connectors. These are very important for making a good waterproof splice. So, using a box cutter with a very, very thin tip sticking out, or your wire strippers, we're going to score the outside of the coating ever so slightly. If you look really closely here, you can see that I haven't penetrated the coating, I've only scored it. So now at this point, we'll be able to just break that coating and pull it off the 2-wire path. You'll see this excess, you can just cut that off. We'll do the same thing for the other side at approximately the same length. You'll see again that we only scored the outside coating, we haven't gone all the way through. After you've snapped and pulled that coating off, you'll want to check right here where the cut was made for the sleeving to make sure that you didn't nick the wires at all. So check both ends of the 2-wire path and make sure that that's clean. Now, we'll separate the wires so that we have a nice piece of wiring on both sides to start with. Being as though this is a 14 gauge wire, we're going to find the 14 gauge opening on our wire strippers. We're going to cut back about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of that coating. And when you do, you're going to want to make sure that you check right where that cut was to make sure there's no nicks in the wire. This could become a weak point when you're putting the wire nut on. So we'll do that for all of them. We'll cut them all about the same length. So make sure you get it to that right setting on your strippers. So you'll see that they're approximately the same length. So now we're going to cut the blue wire. Same process as the red. Cut it about 1 to 1.5 inches. Using your 14 gauge opening on the path. You're going to cut it and you're going to strip back that coating. Do the same thing for this one. We'll pull it right off. So again, on all of these connections or all of these cuts, we're going to want to make sure we didn't nick the wire at any point right here. Now, if you're doing a 2-point splice where you're just continuing on the system, all you're going to need is 1 red and 1 red from either side, and 1 blue and 1 blue from either side. If you were going to be splicing in your Pilot SG surge arrestor, you would then add these red and blue wires into the wire path in series. We're going to go ahead and take the 2 ends of the red, make sure that they're even in length. If you like, you can even make sure that the coating is cut back to the same length and you just cut the tip off of there so that the wires are the exact same length as well. No pre-twisting is required as these wire nuts are very strong and will twist the wire inside. So we'll put that inside and we'll twist this on vigorously. Now, check both wires to make sure that they are snugly in the wire nut. And then we're going to feed it into the tubing. Now, to show you how well that this twists the wires, I'm going to back it off slowly to show you what that twist looks like. The teeth of the wire nut have cut into the metal coating or into the copper wire here and have twisted this in a very clean way. So you can ensure that you have a great connection on those wires. Again, same process, make sure that these are the same length. Cut them at the same length. Take your wire nut, put it on, twist it down tight to make sure you have that nice twisted connection. Again, check all wires that are in that connection. Once you've ensured that you have a good connection with your splice, we're going to go ahead and slide it into the tubing. You're going to want to take and make that straight ahead of time, and you'll see that there are tips, little wings on this wire nut that fit right into these little grooves in the connector. Now make sure you line that wing up with that connector slide for those wings and slide it all the way to the bottom. And about halfway to 3/4 of the way down, you might burp it to make sure you get any air out of there and that you make a great seal around the cap. And ensure that the wire nut has reached all the way to the bottom of the tube. Now you're going to separate the wires into individual slots, their own slots. And then your strain relief is built into the cap. So go ahead and click that down. And you want to make sure you get it all the way down and you get a good, nice strain relief and a good, nice waterproof connection. You'll see here, both wires are in there in their respective slots, and the wire nut is all the way down at the bottom of the tubing. So the goo is definitely around and waterproofed. We'll do the same thing for the red side. Open it up, find the grooves, slide it all the way down, burp it, make sure it's all the way down, split those wires in the correct slots, and click that down nice and tight so that you hear a double click and that cap is on nice and snug. Now, you've ensured that you have a nice waterproof, strong connection, and the strain relief is now built into that connection as well. And that's how you do a continuation splice or a T-splice in a Hunter 2-wire path. Now that we have our waterproof splice in the field, we want to make sure we can find it in the future for troubleshooting or adding an additional wire path to the system. So, make sure you have ample slack before you bury the wire. About 5 feet is recommended. Curl that up and store it in that box for future use. You may need to come back to this, so you want to be able to find it. Go ahead and put it inside the valve box and have it ready for future use. So now, we're going to make a splice inside of the cavity of the TTS-800. So, we're going to use our 2-wire path, and we're going to cut it back about 14 inches because the cavity here is about 9 inches in height. So just a little bit under 9 inches. So we want a little bit of room to play with above the sprinkler so that we can make splices in the future if need be. So our first step is going to be measuring this back about 14 inches. And there we have it. There's about our 14-inch mark right there. Then we're going to do the same process as we did for our inline splice, where we score the outside of the coating. You can see we just scored it. We didn't cut all the way through. We're going to crack that and pull that coating right off, exposing the 2-wire path. And now, in this situation, we're only going to be installing the final head. So we won't have a wire continuing from the rotor on into the field. We're simply going to slide this up inside through one of the 3 ports in the bottom. And then we're going to want to feed it up all the way to the top. So keep pushing, keep pushing, keep pushing until you can grab that wire and pull it all the way up to the top of the sprinkler body. we're going to want the jacket of the 2-wire path to feed all the way up to the bottom of that inlet, right there. So it's nice and snug. Now, we have this additional wire to work with at the top of the sprinkler. We have ourselves a little bit of extra slack so that we can make a splice in the future if need be. So here inside the cavity, we have the two-way module. The two-way module, if you'll notice, in this scenario, the two-way module is connected and already potted into the solenoid. So there's no further connections outside of the 2-wire path on initial installation. The 2 wires coming from the two-way module are the red and the blue wire. These are the wires that need to be connected to the 2-wire path. So you'll see that they're pre-scored and cut back so that you can easily pull the tab off the tip and have access to the wiring inside. Now, you can notice we'll do the same thing for the red wire, and we're already cut back about an inch. An inch is okay. We're going to give ourselves a little bit more wiggle room because this is a little bit smaller wire and we want it to catch. So we'll find the right setting on our wire strippers. We'll cut back the coating. And now we have ourselves about an inch to an inch and a half of coating exposed. We're going to do the same thing on the red wire so we ensure that they're the same connection and the same length. Pull that back. As you can see, we're about the same there. Okay, now that we have the two-way module wires cut back and exposed, we need to do the same thing for the 2-wire path. So we're going to match that length on both the red and the blue wire from the 2-wire path. There's one. There's two. Now, it's going to be the same process as before, where we're going to use the wire nut to screw the wires together and make a nice twisted pair and a nice connection. So we'll line those up. They're about the same length. We'll put that inside the wire nut and we'll twist that vigorously until those wires are connected together. And like we did before, we're going to test that connection to make sure it's secure. We're going to do the same thing for the red wire. Line them up so the coating is the same length. Put that inside the wire nut and twist it down. Nice and snug. Until none of the copper wire is exposed and visible outside of the wire nut. So we have that both for the red and the blue. And now the same process for the waterproofing. We're going to use the waterproof connector to slide the wire nut into to make sure we have a nice waterproof connection for long-term service. So again, we're going to line up the wire nut with the sleeve. So there are 2 areas for the wings on the wire nut to slide into. We're going to push that all the way down, burp it, and push it all the way to the bottom. So now we have a nice good connection all the way to the bottom. And again, we're going to separate the wires into 2 different canals, and we're going to click that on nice and tight. So now we have a good waterproof connection on the blue side of the 2-wire path. We're going to do the same thing for the red, and now this connection will be complete. So we'll make sure that we line it up with the grooves in the opening with the wings on the wire nut. So we'll make sure that we go right in there, line them up, and then we're going to push down to the bottom. Right before we get to the bottom, we're going to burp that baby and go all the way down so that we have that nice waterproof connection. Now, we're going to insert those wires back into their respective grooves and clamp the top all the way down. You'll notice a little bit of whitening in the top where the strain relief is because it's now pinching down on the wire. So now that we have the waterproof connectors on, the nuts are all the way down to the bottom. We're going to push the waterproof connector down into the body of the sprinkler with the tip pointing up so that if any water gets into the rotor, it doesn't go into the waterproof connector. So we'll slide that down inside the rotor like so. Now we'll put the lid back on and this sprinkler is ready to operate. In this scenario, we have a wire coming in from the controller and out to our next rotor in the system. I'm going to show you how to splice the 2-way module wires into the inline 2-wire path. Again, we're going to use the 3M DBRY-6 waterproof wire connector, which is our spec in our 2-wire design guide. So let's get started. Again, we have the 2-way module wires already pre-nipped, so we can pull those tabs right off. But for a better connection, we're going to cut back just a little bit more of that connector. So we'll find the right grooves in there, pull that back. We want to match it with the red side. Pull that back. Okay, we got the same length on those. Now we want to also double check that we didn't nick the wire right there and we use the proper opening in our wire splicing tool. We need to separate the 2 wires that are twisted in their pair. And we're going to do the same process, cutting back the coating on the wire path. So we'll separate the reds from the blues. And again, the red will go over there, the blue will go over there. So now we're going to have 3 wires within one connector. So utilizing the distance that we have here, we'll measure out our 2-wire path cut. We'll find the right connector slot there. We'll cut that wire path back, slide it right off. We'll do the same length for this one. We have the incoming blue wire as well as the outgoing blue wire to the next rotor. Now we also have the 2-way module blue wire that we're going to put in series with all 3 of these and bring them together in one waterproof connection. It is recommended that you pre-twist the decoder wire onto one of the other wires to make sure that it gets into that splice correctly. So again, we're going to use our wire nut to make that twist in the wire path. So we'll put that on there and we'll crank that baby down nice and snug. And again, once we've got it nice and snug, we want to make sure that none of these wires are going to pull out of the connection. So now that we know we have a strong connection on there, we're going to go ahead and do the red path. So we'll cut the red wires back to the length of the 2-way module wire that we cut. Okay, now that we all have those cut to the same length, slightly twist that 2-way module wire onto one of the 2-wire path connections. Put the 2 tips together and utilizing your wire nut, make sure you have a nice strong connection again. So crank that down, make sure you get it nice and deep and that there's no exposed copper sticking out below the connector. So you can see that there's no copper sticking out. We're going to check to make sure each one of those wires is nice and snug in there. And now we have our wire nuts on. But it's not enough just to have the wire nuts, we need to waterproof it as well. So we used the gel-filled tube on the 3M DBRY-6 connector to waterproof this connection. So again, you're going to slide the wings of the wire nut into the wing opening of the waterproof connector. So make sure you line those up and you push all the way down to the bottom, burping about 3/4 of the way down and seating it at the bottom to make sure you have a nice strong connection. Now at this point, you can separate the wires into their respective slots. We'll put the 2-way module in one slot and the incoming and outgoing wires into another slot. Once we have them in their slots, we're going to clip that cap down and make sure it's nice and snug on there so we have that great waterproof connection. Now, we have an incoming and an outgoing 2-wire path in one connection. We're going to do the same thing for the blue side. Open up our connector. And we're going to slide the wings into the wing openings like so. Make sure that that gets all the way down the bottom, do a burp. That method allows for the waterproofing grease to move around the connector and make sure it's a nice waterproof connection. So again, we're going to separate each wire into its own slot, as well as the blue wire here. And we're going to clamp that down to make sure that we have a nice, strong, waterproof connection with strain relief built into the connection. Now, We're going to just shove that back down into the sprinkler body. And we now have a waterproof connection with an incoming and outgoing 2-wire path. So once you have the connection complete, put the cap back on, tighten down the top, and that sprinkler is good to go. In this scenario, we have a wire coming in from the controller and out to the next rotor in the field. We're going to add another 2-wire path to another set of rotors. So we're going to create a T-splice with 3 connections in our single connector. So you'll notice, even though we're wiring together 3 rows of 2-wire path and the 2-way module, we're only still using 2 connectors. So the process is relatively the same. We just have an extra wire, which is going to make this splice a little bit more tight. Now, we're going to start like we did before and cut back the sleeving on this to about 1 inch to 1.5 inches. Now we want to take all 3 of the 2-wire paths coming in, separating the blue from the red in the twisted pair for each one of these. And now we have our blues and we have our reds. The blue path, or the blue wire on the 2-way module, is going to come to the blue side of the path, while the red is going to come to the red. So now we're going to take and cut the coating back on all 3 of these to match the same length as this. So finding our proper opening on our wire splicing tool, or our wire strippers, we're going to cut back the coating to the same length on every single one of these. So we'll give it a quick little measure and do the same thing for each one. Now go ahead and make sure that those are all the same length. And if they're not, you can cut one that might be a little bit longer or cut back a little bit more of the coating on one that might have come out a little bit shorter. We're going to do that. And remember, so we want to make sure that where we cut the insulation back, we want to make sure there's no nicks in the wire, because those nicks can become weak points when there's either strain on the wire or when we're installing the wire nut, it could twist that wire off. So make sure that you didn't nick the wire. Now, once we have all 3 the same length, and the same length as our 2-way module wire, we're going to slightly twist that around one of the wires, bring all of these to the same length, and using our DBY-6 red and yellow wire nut, we're going to put all 4 of those wires into the nut and twist it down nice and snug. Now, just like we've done on the rest of them, we're going to want to make sure that the wires are tight on each one. So let's give each one a nice tug to make sure they're in there nice and snug. Now, we'll put that aside and we'll put the waterproof tubing on after. We're going to follow the same process on the red path, and we're going to cut each one of these lengths back to the same length that we cut for the 2-way module. So find the right connector, cut the sleeving back on each one. Okay, so now that we have our 3 wires coming from the 2-wire path and our 2-way module wire, we're going to slightly turn that around one of the wires. Now put all 4 wires together at the same length. Grab our 3M DBRY-6 wire nut and twist it down nice and tight, ensuring all 4 of those wires get twisted together very well. Now, we're going to test each of the wires coming out of it to make sure that we have that snug connection. Okay, so now we have the red path and the blue path all wired up in their wire nuts. Now, we need to waterproof them. So we're going to open up our connector, we're going to find those grooves, and we're going to slide those down in there, burping it, before we complete the slide down to the bottom. We want to make sure that that wire nut's all the way to the bottom. And now we're going to separate these wires into their respective paths. So find a groove for each one of the wires, and then take the two-way module wire and set it over to one of the three sides with one of the larger wires. Line them up and clip that down nice and tight till you hear it click, to make sure you have a nice waterproof connection on the red side of the wire path. We'll do the same thing for the blue one. Line it up in the grooves, push it all the way to the bottom, burp it, and continue down. Find a groove for each one of the wires. There you have it. Now we have the red side and the blue side of the wire path with all three 2-wire paths coming in, wired into the 2 waterproof splices. So we can do the same thing. We can take these and push them down into the cavity of the sprinkler with the tips pointing up so that water can't intrude into the splice. Anything that gets in here will drain out of the splice, keeping that nice and waterproof. We'll take the top, put it back on, tighten it down, and there you have it. We have a 3-way T-splice inside of the TTS-800 rotor. In summary, we showed you 3 different splicing techniques on the TTS-800. The first being the end of the line, where it would be the last rotor on the system with one 2-wire path coming in. We showed you a midpoint rotor where you would have the wire path coming in from the controller and out to the next head in the system. We also showed you the 3-way splice, which has the wire coming in from the controller out to another head in the field, as well as a T-splice for another connection into another 2-wire path in the system. So there you have it. That's the 3 ways to splice a TTS-800. Thanks for watching, and for more information, visit hunterindustries.com.